Have you started to feel less like yourself lately? Maybe worn out and more withdrawn, or like the version of you that used to feel present and genuinely alive has slowly slipped away and you can't quite pinpoint when it happened? If that sounds familiar, then fear not, you are still in there, I promise you. It's just that stress has likely influenced your personality a little bit, but it can be reversed. I know this because I've seen it in hundreds of people that I've worked with over the years, purpose-driven people that I've worked with, and I've lived it myself. I'm Charlotte, and over the last 20 years, I've seen that the people who are carrying a lot start feeling a slow erosion of their own personality under the weight of sustained pressure. It's one of the most common things I see and one of the most misunderstood. So today we're diving into exactly what stress does to your personality and why it's not what most people think. I'll share why people who care the most are often the last to see it happening and what actually reverses it, because it's not more breathing exercises or just taking things off of your plate. But first, I want to share something that's going to reframe the way you see this completely, because the way this shows up for people who are used to just pushing through stress doesn't look like falling apart. It looks like the opposite, and that's exactly what makes it so hard to catch. It's a lie that all stress is bad. Sometimes it can make life better, but we have to be aware of when it makes you more impressive on the outside and less recognizable on the inside. When clients first come to me, they always say the same thing. They want to feel like themselves again, their old self that was more energetic and more joyful and more present. They want to get back to that so that they can care for the people in their lives and fulfill their purpose from a place of overflow rather than depletion. But what they're actually experiencing is not just a personality shift. It's stress doing exactly what it's designed to do. One client of mine is 38 years old. She runs a company. She is a mum of two kids. She has a team who genuinely respects her and a life that from the outside looks really good. It's the life that she's been working for. Yet, she was telling me about a time where she found herself sitting at dinner with her best friend. A moment that used to be easy for her, where she could just let go and enjoy herself and have deep, meaningful conversations. And one day, though, she realised that she was just nodding along. She was trying to laugh at the right moments and trying to ask the right follow-up questions. But it was a struggle. Physically, she was there, but mentally, she wasn't. She admitted feeling checked out from her own life. Even coming home to her kids, she still obviously loved them, but she said the hugs just felt less fulfilling than what they used to. She started getting more snappy and more irritable, and she just started asking herself, what's happened to me? Why am I so different now? And I just don't recognize myself anymore. That is exactly what stress does, and nobody tells you to expect it. So here's how it happens. Think of your brain as having two parts. One that acts like a smoke alarm, and one that acts like a wise teacher. When stress is short term, the smoke alarm is doing its job. It's keeping you alert and on the lookout for smoke or stress, right? But when stress goes on for a long time, that alarm just starts to get louder and louder because it's trying to sense danger. And the wise teacher inside then starts to get harder and harder to hear. So we lose ourselves in that moment. But this isn't just happening in your own brain or in your mind, it's happening inside of your body too. You see, your nervous system is running your whole body, constantly scanning for the answer to one question. It wants to know, are you safe? And when the answer is yes, your nervous system opens up and the wise teacher comes to the surface. You can think clearly and feel warm and be curious and be present. And you then get access to that full version of yourself that perhaps is the part that you feel like is missing. But when the answer is no, and it's not finding safety and that you're safe as the answer to the question, or if the answer has been no for a long time, the nervous system starts to shift into protection mode. And in protection mode, it starts rationing the energy that's available to you. It narrows what you feel and limits what it allows you to express. It pulls all of your energy away from being yourself, from connection, creativity, and joy, and it redirects it into survival. That's why you become irritable or more withdrawn or more rigid. Not because there's something wrong with you and your personality, but because your nervous system is doing exactly what it's designed to do when it's been under load for too long. The good news is that your nervous system responds to safety signals. So you don't have to force yourself back into who you were or try to change your personality. You just have to create the conditions where your system starts to feel safe again. Because when it does, the alarm starts to get quieter and that wise teacher, your authentic self, starts to get louder. And more of the real you just starts to come back to the surface. This is predictable. It's how we're designed as human beings, and it's reversible. And by the way, if you want to reverse this and get personalized insights on this, then I have a free tool linked in the description where you'll be able to see exactly where your stress patterns are sitting right now and how they could be affecting your personality. It's the Stress Less Scorecard, and it will take you less than a few minutes to complete. But here's the thing that trips most people up. You see, people who carry a lot of responsibility often don't read it as stress because they get rewarded for how they cope with it. So stress and burnout isn't always someone visibly falling apart, right? Often people I work with are still showing up and leading and helping people and parenting and juggling life's responsibilities, right? The personality change is happening invisibly beneath the smile that they're putting on for everyone else around them. And their coping mechanisms are often getting praised. For example, they have incredibly high standards that often get praised, but actually underneath, the standards are there because of this fear or lack of safety. So the standards give them this sense of control. They're trying to actually protect what's happening and control what's happening around them. Or what gets called focus can be emotional avoidance. What gets called discipline is often a nervous system that has become rigid through stress. And what gets called independence, and people praise it, is often isolation because it's easier for the nervous system to just shut down and protect itself than to stay open to other people or other experiences. And the classic one I see all the time is being busy all the time. And this happens typically because we are trying to avoid this sense of stillness, which is why typically a lot of people feel uncomfortable when they're not busy. So when somebody says, I'm busy, when you ask them how they are, really understand that maybe there's something else going on under the surface. So when these personality traits show up, they are often getting praised. They become the reliable person, the optimized one who's always available, prepared, and often very low maintenance because they can appear to have all of those traits, but maybe they're covering up something that's happening under the surface. Maybe they've also become less playful, open, less patient, and less connected, and just less trusting of themselves. And that is a really heavy mask to wear. And on top of all of this, the people who carry a lot also experience what we call meaning fatigue. And the cost for purpose-driven people specifically is devastating because they typically carry the emotional load for other people, right? Their teams, their families, their clients, their communities. They've learned to be whoever the room needs them to be, which isn't always who they truly are. And over the years, that suppression adds up. Now, for people who define themselves by their contribution, the ones who care the most, this is one of the most devastating things because under long-term chronic stress, caring less becomes a symptom. And caring was the very thing that they identified with in the first place, whether that be their mission, their impact, or their ability to look after people. But unfortunately, that feeling and that connection to caring starts to feel muted. That can create a real identity crisis. And the tragedy is that these people have been running on stress chemistry for so long that they just now think it's who they are. But then on top of that, they start judging themselves for it. They don't read it as stress, they read it as this is the person who I'm becoming, right? And that's just not true. This then leads to the experience of something called identity grief, where we start mourning who it is we used to be. You see, it can become a lonely place when you can't figure out who you are. And it gets even worse when you feel like others don't recognize you either, because you no longer feel seen, heard, and understood, which is one of the core needs for everyone. Now, the people closest to us then start to meet our stress signals and our stress response and the mask that we're wearing before they meet your real personality. And your energy then starts to leak to the people around you, and it becomes contagious even when you don't mean it to. So we don't feel like ourselves anymore. And when you feel like you've lost part of yourself, there's a genuine grief in that. There's a sadness for that missing part of you. You miss your humor or your softness and maybe even your optimism that you once had. You likely then miss the ability to enjoy life without scanning for the next problem or judging yourself. And people often start to adopt an identity around that. They start to say things like, I've just become grumpy as I age, or this is just who I am now. But then they start to carry the shame of that judgment on top of the stress, which makes it even worse. But this is not who you are. This is what stress does when it's been going on for too long. So, before I share an insight into how to reverse this, I want to quickly share how this showed up for me because I think you'll really resonate. So, when I was younger, every time something stressed me out, or I felt hurt, or felt confused, or lost, or something cruel was happening in the world or to me, I just really did what most of us do, and I built walls. Not consciously or deliberately, I just slowly and quietly built these walls around me, one layer at a time. And over time, I built this like shell of protection around my body, around my heart, around my energy and my sense of personality. And over time, that shell became the world that I lived in. I moved through life inside of it, and I became this shy, quiet version of myself that really was trying to just feel safe. Inside that shell, it felt familiar. I understood the rules in my own little world. But what I didn't realize was that the longer I lived inside that shell, the more I started to mistake it for who I am. And then the face that I put on for everyone around me became the personality. And that became my identity. And it was just a form of protection. And because I'd built this shell to keep stress and pain out, I'd also, without knowing it, kept myself out. I couldn't feel what was going on really underneath it. Right? I knew what I thought and I could articulate everything intellectually, but actually feeling and knowing who I was and what I needed and trusting my own instincts and connecting to what was really going on inside of me and to my own voice, I'd lost my ability to do that. My nervous system had learned that living in chaos was normal and this was my response to it. This pressure was safe if I responded this way. And that for me looked like pushing through, and it's just how life worked. And I run that program for so long that I genuinely couldn't tell the difference between who I was and what I'd adapted to become. And that's just what prolonged stress does. It doesn't just change how you feel, it changes how you move through the world. And eventually you stop recognizing the gap between who you are and who you're being, which is why you don't feel like yourself. So if you're finding this useful, take that Stress Less scorecard in the description because it will help you map out exactly where your own stress patterns are getting in the way of who you truly are. So here's what actually reverses it, and it's not what most people try. If you're watching this, you've probably already read the books, done the therapy, tried the meditation apps, and done all of the surface level work that you can think of and that you can find. But what needs reversing is the deeper patterns underneath, not just taking one more stressor off your plate or a bit of exercise or another deep breath. For one of my clients, it started with realizing that she hadn't made a decision based on what she actually wanted in over 3 years. She recognized that every single choice that she'd been making had been shaped by what would keep everything stable for everyone else around her. That was the first safety signal that we had to rebuild. She needed to feel safe, to give herself permission to want something for herself again. So for you watching this, you need to get to the root of it. So to reverse this and feel like yourself again, you need to learn how to regulate your own nervous system. You need to find what makes you feel safe and calm your own nervous system again. Look at the behaviours and why you're conditioned to react to stress this way. Look at your values alignment and your belief systems, your recovery rhythms, and where you feel safe enough to actually connect again. These reflections are essentially safety signals and cues. They're a way to help your nervous system understand what it's been trying to protect you from psychologically and what it might be finally ready to let go of. So ask yourself, what are you protecting yourself from? What would allow you to feel at ease? What are your coping mechanisms that look socially acceptable on the outside? If you had all the energy in the world, what do you care about the most? What do you value? What's giving you meaning? And how would those things improve if you gave yourself the opportunity and permission to recover and reconnect with your true self? Take the time to answer those questions, because you don't recover your personality by forcing yourself to just be who you were. You recover it by creating the conditions where you no longer need to protect yourself so much. The old you is still in there, it's just buried underneath this protective mechanism that's been built. When you rebuild those conditions of safety, it won't come back as your old self. It will come back as a new evolved version of you, the traits that you loved from the past, but also everything you've gained along the way that we might have missed. So go ahead and reconnect today. But listen, here's the thing. Everything I've shared with you is useful to get you started, but to truly reverse the effects that stress is having on your personality and on those that you care about, you need to look deeper at what else could be contributing to your stress or burnout in the first place. You can do that in the next video just here. I'll see you in there.